First, it was a home for runaway slaves. Then, not surprisingly, it became Brooklyn's first penitentiary. Now, many Brooklyn residents are on edge and unhappy about who this Brooklyn building is about to become home to. Or is it why? Brooklyn attorney Richard Hurley will be my guest in less than a minute to discuss this. Also in this program, I'll be joined by a one-time crack dealer who went on to become one of the highest-ranking members of the NYPD and who has written a book that says it all, Two Worlds, One Man. This is Brooklyn 45. Thanks for joining us. From penitentiary to a shelter, email with that title is being widely circulated throughout Brooklyn. What is that all about?
Well, first of all, good evening, and thank you for having me, Dr. Tate. There is a backdrop here that I think is very potent and significant, and that is the history of Crown Heights itself, and how did we get to this place. The site that we're talking about was the first government institution that was built in Crown Heights. So since we're talking about Crown Heights, let's talk about that site that's now called 267 Rogers Avenue or 211 Crown Street.
Okay.
In 1846, the penitentiary was built on that hill that was called Crow Hill. And it's a derogatory term. Back in those days, they didn't use the N-word.
Jim Crow.
Jim Crow, Eat Crow, Heckle and Jekyll, you name it, right? So it was called Crow Hill for a reason.
Yes.
And it was called Crow Hill because Brooklyn was an agricultural land. And this particular hill was tough to agriculture, tough for that. In Brooklyn, we sold tobacco, corn, and fish. So they put all of the blacks on this hill. And they called it Crow Hill. So everybody knows that's where you go. If you're a runaway slave, if you're an indentured servant, you go to Crow Hill. Now, the first building that was built on Crow Hill is at the site that we're talking about today.
Right.
It was the first penitentiary that was built in Kings County, period. It was called Kings County Penitentiary. But what happened was, because it was Crow Hill, they called it, the nickname was Crow Penitentiary.
Right.
And in addition to that, they would have the crow claw on the uniforms of the prisoners so they can show that this is for the crows, this is for the Negroes, if you will. So that was in 1846. And in 1891, the armory on Atlantic Avenue and Bedford Avenue, at the bottom of the hill, that was built.
Okay.
Now, back in those days, let me give you further backdrop, there was a lot of civil unrest. So they thought it was necessary to put an armory at the bottom of the hill to keep the blacks on the hill. And 12 years later, in 1903, they decided to build what they called the Bedford Union Armory. But when they built the Bedford Union Armory, it wasn't so much for the disorderly conduct of the people, because there was a lot of unrest. So armories was going up all over the nation to keep the people at rest, but they had to make sure that the Negroes were in their place. So they put the armory on the bottom of the hill. They built the armory in 1903 on Bedford and Union at the top of the hill. It was a state-of-the-art armory. Where was it? 2 blocks from the site that we're talking about today. Go further, in 1907, they actually closed the penitentiary in 1907. But in 1916, it was still called Crow Hill. In 1916, they put an N on Crow, and they called it Crown. Because it was on the hill, they call it Crown Heights.
Right.
My street, the block that I live on, was built in 1916. Okay, so that's the backdrop. So let's get back to the site that we call now 267 Rogers Avenue. As I mentioned, it was penitentiary for reasons. After that, when it closed in 1907, it then built Brooklyn College. And Brooklyn College had a lot of, I can't speak to that history because there was some religious things there going on there with the Catholic schools and the Catholic church and everything else. But it ended up becoming what we now know as Medgar Evers College there. But on the other part of that site was called the St. Ignatius Church,
yes.
Catholic Church.
The Catholic Church, yes.
That's exactly right. So it went from the Brooklyn College, it was called the first Brooklyn College in Brooklyn.
And that's where it was.
That's where it was. It's now we see it as Medgar Evers College. So they took that same building. However, the Ignatius Church, St. Ignatius Church, was on that corner. But the problem I have, let's go back to the college. When the penitentiary was knocked down in 1907. Before they built the school, they should have done what they called an archaeological study to figure out what bones are underneath there. Why? Because it's a burial ground. Listen, in 1960 something, back in the days of this, the civil rights era, black people were going to jail and you never seen them again. Could you imagine what was happening in 1907, in 1903? So many blacks went in there. Why? And why did they built the penitentiary there? This particular site that we're talking about, they built it there because there was no longer slavery. This is the way to get free labor. So that site is historical.
And you're saying that the bodies were buried there?
They were not only buried there, sir, they were buried in canisters. Some of them would claim to have diseases, so they didn't want to bury them anywhere. So they buried them right there on that ground the penitentiary is at, in canisters. And so they just dumped the bodies in canisters. In addition to that, because I mentioned the free labor, the women that they had at that prison, and by the way, every prisoner was arrested off of slight misconducts, whatever they could do to get you in that jail, the way they do sometimes today. What was being done certainly in 1907 and 1848 and those times. So you have a lot of women going in there just to do work. It was factories inside the prison to do work, free labor.
Right.
Some of these women had babies. These babies never came out of there. These women never came out of there. They were buried in canisters there. And so as for me, from a humanity point of view, that just outrages me. So I'm gonna stick with the story for a minute. So after the penitentiary,
Okay, because I want to get to 2017 really quickly, but go on.
I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there. So what happened is, you have Brooklyn College, and one little small note about the Brooklyn College is the person who wrote The Exorcist went to school there.
Really?
Really, all right? And then you have the same thing. So now they closed the church. They give a 99-year lease to this 267 Rogers Avenue. They built it, and it's supposed to be for luxury housing. When you look into the windows, sir, if you look into the windows and the way this thing is built, I haven't had a tour yet, but I've been looking through the windows. This looks like a human warehouse. They initially said that this is supposed to be luxury housing because they built as of right. They didn't have to do anything for the community at all. But
this was the church.
This was the site of the church.
Yes.
2013. Whenever the church closed, they started this building that they have now, that we see now.
Yes.
And I'm telling you that the refrigerators are this long, this big. The refrigerators are small. The rooms are small. This is a warehouse, sir, for human beings. The part of me, and I don't know this, never thought the developers meant this to be a luxurious house. Complex.
But it was supposed to be affordable housing. So now we move on. It's no longer affordable housing? Is that what
well,
you're
now
saying?
they have made arrangements with the city without any public scrutiny to make this a shelter for families. Now, many of us are not against housing families because we all know too well how people are displaced. However, what kind of families are going to be there? Are these women who were abused? Are these women who offer drugs now and finish rehab? Are these people who've been in jail and now trying to come back? We don't know the makeup of the families, but the point is that a shelter is always a transient location. The neighborhood, we do not want a transient location.
Now, what is your position in the neighborhood?
Well, I'm the president of Crown Heights Community Council.
Okay.
So that simply means that in the Crown Heights Community Council, the presidents of various block associations,
Yes.
the 71st Precinct president, and even Juve's organization are in Crown Heights Community Council, including Ebbets Field, big organization. You have Lincoln Terrace Park, and you have Lefferts Park, all a part of Crown Heights Community Council.
Yes.
And we're together so we could be one unit.
What are you trying to do about this shelter?
Well, Dion Ashman, the president of Crown Street Block Association, has done a fantastic job on bringing a lot of attention to this. He's been very busy knocking on doors, making phone calls, and putting a lot of attention on it. And there's going to be meetings, subsequent meetings after that. But the one thing you need to know, Dr. Tate, is that this thing woke up the homeowners. This is what makes this different. This is different because the homeowners are now interested because the values of their home may be in jeopardy. One, the homeowners, let me just say this thought. The homeowners, not that they were quiet, but to see the meeting that was put together by Crown Street Block Association, the homeowners came out. right? That made it totally different because all of this time we're talking about affordable housing. For who? The people who are renters. Those are the renters. But now this shelter issue has brought the homeowners out of their house.
And the homeowners are a mix of blacks and
Well, now they're
Jews.
black and whites, and some Jews, yes. Yeah, these are homeowners.
Yes.
And so now they're up in arms because their values of their home may be in jeopardy.
What is the impact likely to be?
Well, see, that's the problem. You just hit the nail on the head. The community is simply asking for an impact study. How does this impact the community? How does it impact our schools? With these, if you're talking about shelter for 300 and some odd units, and these are children, where they're going to go to school down the block? Do we have room to put another 300 children into those schools? What about and other issues that come up with that?
Yes. Security. Have you discussed the security aspect of it?
That's the big thing. This is what an impact study will give you. So how can de Blasio make this deal without having an impact study so that at least we in the neighborhood can have some scrutiny about it and have some say, if any, about this thing?
What organization is going to be managing the shelter?
Offhand, I can't tell you the name of the organization, but it's a nonprofit. I don't have that off the top of my head. It would come to me, but
And it's not a local. It's not a
not a local. No,
But they have experience managing shelters across.
I couldn't say that. I couldn't answer that. I just couldn't answer that question.
What is likely to happen with a changing neighborhood? You have many persons buying their homes, but now you have these new residents moving in. What is likely to be the result of the reshaping of the Crown Heights and that Crown Height area?
Well, I hate to speculate, but we must in this instance. Those that have been in Crown Heights like myself, I've been in Crown Heights for 35 years in my same place that I've been living for 35 years. Now I've seen people get older and they're seniors. What are they going to do? If they stay, the property value may go down. Right now, the property values are booming.
Yes.
You throw the shelter in there, people may decide to sell out while it's good before the impact of the shelter hits them and then moves to another place off to retirement.
I understand that residents have filed a lawsuit against the city for violating, I think, what they call the fair share laws.
Well, they first of all, it was 1173 Bergen Street. That's the shelter that they're talking about. And Jackie McMickens, who's she's a very good attorney. In fact, we sat next to each other in law school, so I'm kind of biased that way. Okay. But Jackie took them to court, that developer in that particular building, and Judge Paul Wooten stopped everything for further evaluation.
This shelter, is it a done deal?
Well, if you take the temperature of the developers, if you take the temperature of our mayor, if you take the temperature of certain elected officials, everything is already a done deal. So we're spinning our wheels here.
So you don't expect anything to...
Well, I expect to have some sort of impact because we're kind of loud in Crown Heights. If you've been following Crown Heights, we have a hell of a neighborhood with a lot of great people in it, and we have our own professionals. No matter whatever you go into, we have our own right in Crown Heights. So I'm just happy to see the homeowners get up and get excited about this shelter business, because before it was all the renters who were being kicked out, all the people who are renting. They didn't touch the private homeowners. But this shelter, it brought out the private homeowners, and now with them, our community clout has enhanced threefold.
I want to thank you for being my guest on Brooklyn 45, from penitentiary to shelter. And you said the shelter is a done deal.
I think so.
And you think so. As an attorney and as one of the leaders of the community, you have to accept it.
Not as such. It's going to be a shelter of sorts, but I think that the question is what's the makeup? I can't. It's hard for me as an attorney, to lock myself in a box. I won't do that because there's always hope and there's always a chance.
Yes.
I mean, look at what we did with the Armory, and all the good work that we did with the Armory. But then we got to a point where we at now.
Well, we shall see.
We shall see.
And
Stay tuned.
We shall keep our eyes open. You're
That's
right.
sir.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Thank you for being on Brooklyn 45 and
Thank you
for
for having
opening
me.
our eyes from penitentiary to shelter. My next guest is a one-time crack dealer who went on to become one of the highest-ranking members of the largest police force in the country, and is now the author of a book. This book, Once a Cop. We'll be talking about this. Corey Pegues, welcome to Brooklyn 45.
Thanks for having me, Doc.
You were here on Brooklyn 45 several years ago when you were the commanding officer of, I don't know if I should say the precinct, the 67th precinct.
Yeah.
But there was a younger you on the opposite side of the law.
Yeah.
What was this younger you?
The younger me was the person that had already transformed his life. And by that time, I went to the 6-7 precinct. By the way, I was the first black commander.
But the younger you before that.
The younger me.
The
younger me.
The young you. The young Corey Pegues.
Oh, man, that guy was crazy. That guy was running in the streets doing a lot of crazy things due to circumstances that was beyond his control. Growing up poor in a family of 6, 5 sisters, and myself. My father left in the 3rd grade. When he left the house, we lost the house. Sometimes we didn't have lights, gas. Sometimes we didn't have running water. Things went downhill. We had to move above a number spot. I don't even know if they really have those gambling spots no more around New York City. So right on the corner of Murdoch and Farmers, we moved above this number spot. And I started gravitating to the streets. I was hanging in this park called O'Connell Park on 196th Street and Murdoch Avenue in Queens. I started hanging with different guys. And about the age of 13, one day this guy approached my man, Sean Dew, and asked him if me and Sean would sell some joints for him. He said he'd give us 100 joints, and we give him $80 and take $20 off every 100. So it sounded like a good idea to me. I was tired of eating mayonnaise sandwich, mustard sandwiches, eating cereal with carnation milk or water. And so that was when I first started into the game, selling loosies, which was marijuana rolled up in bamboo paper. And then we started graduating and doing more things. Started selling mescaline tabs, powder cocaine, which was a high-end drug. You know, it was a little expensive, $25, a little expensive. But then about 84, the end of 84, beginning of 85, this wonder drug called crack hit the streets of New York. And then my man approached us and was like, listen, y'all need to sell this. All those guys are buying weed, they're going to be crackheads. And then we started selling that, and we started making money hand over fist. You know, the difference was that we was selling weed, marijuana, we was making a few $100s here and there. And we started selling crack cocaine, we was making thousands of dollars a week. It was just phenomenal the way this drug hit our community and decimated the community. It's amazing when I look back and think about all the money that changed hands. I'm just talking about my little crew. It was 5 of us on Murdoch Avenue on 198th Street. But then you had the notorious Supreme team, which I eventually started working for, which was one of the most violent drug teams on the East Coast, if not America. You had Fat Cat, you had Corley, you had Tommy Montana. You had all these crews that was making hundreds of thousands of dollars.
How did you get away? How did you
escape
the word? How did you get away from that?
Well, I didn't escape. Well, for me, I was lucky because, believe it or not, even when I was out there selling drugs and doing all these crazy things, carrying pistols, shooting at people, doing all the crazy stuff that's in that book, I mean, I had the moral fortitude because I went to Sunday school every day. I knew everything. You know, on Sundays I went to all three services. My mother taught me right from wrong, but it's not about her teaching me. It's about what I went out there and did. Everything I did, I knew it was wrong that I was doing, but I had to eat. For me, it was just about getting some money, getting some new fresh clothes. Sometimes I had to wear hand-me-downs, and I only had sisters. You understand what I'm saying? You know, there's a picture in the book with me in the 5th grade. I think it's the 5th grade picture. I'm sitting, one of my favorite pictures in the book, I'm sitting in the front of the class for the class picture on that first row, and everybody's saying Indian style. But if you look at that picture, I'm the only one holding the bottom of my feet because I remember it rained that day, and I put cardboard in my shoes because I had holes in the bottom of my feet. So at some point, it's not about the morals and the values you had. For me, it was just really survival, just trying to help myself. You know, I think back now, since the age of 13, I have been taking care of myself. I can't imagine my 9-year-old son taking care of himself for 4 years. I can't even get him to clean his room up. But these were the circumstances that I was dealt, and that's what I did. And I wasn't happy about doing it, but it was just survival. I wasn't trying to be supreme or fat cat, like, drive BMWs, Mercedes. I just wanted to look good, get girls, and eat. That's all it was for me. I made a lot more than doing that, but it was good. It's addictive. It's almost like the money with crack was as addictive as the drug was to the crackhead. The more money I make, 500 today, I want to make 1,000 tomorrow.
Right. How did you transition from that to becoming a police officer?
Yeah, the transition from being a street dude and then becoming a cop, it was pretty easy for me, because at some point I wanted to get out. I knew that I wanted to get out. I mean, my defining moment, there was a few moments I talk about in the book, but the defining moment for me was December 12th, 1986, when I had my son, Corey Jr. Remember, my father left in the 3rd grade. I always wanted that father-son love, and I wasn't getting that. And I held him in my arms at the hospital right here in Brooklyn, and I said, what kind of hero I'm going to be for this kid? And that's what it was about. And so when that happened, it was like, now I got to make my exit strategy. I was fortunate enough to sell all of these drugs, commit all of these crimes, and never get locked up. I got locked up one time, but they got to read about it in the book. We got to give them some suspense.
And even though you were locked up, you still became the commanding officer of the 67th Precinct.
And commanding officer of PSA too, yes. But the disqualifying mark to be a cop is being arrested and convicted of a felony. I never was convicted of a felony, so I was able to be a cop.
Judge Greg Mattis, and I want to read what he said. He said, "This edgy yet captivating memoir is a page-turner, which demonstrably gives insight to the headspace of how and why poor choices are made by inner-city youth, and how negative energy or untapped talent, if steered correctly, can make a world of difference." Now, you've been talking to young people all over the country. I know you have a lot of this in this book. But what are you telling young people, especially the lost young people in our community today?
My main message to these kids are, I have a hashtag called Keep It Right, Not Real. It's about just doing the right thing. And it's hard for me. So one of the things, and I get in trouble sometimes by saying this, I'm going to say this on your show too. I would never tell a kid to stop committing crimes and stop selling drugs if I don't have a plan for
alternative, yes, a plan.
Because I was that kid, and this is a problem. We're always telling kids, stop doing this, stop doing that, and you don't give them an exit plan. See, I was able to be smart enough to come up with my own exit plan. I knew if I stopped selling drugs on the streets and I walked around with $5 in my pocket, my friends was walking around with $3,000. It don't work. It don't work. So even if somebody would have offered me an opportunity to give me a job somewhere, but it had to be away from the community, sometimes you got to take yourself away from the situation. My message today to the kids, I just spoke at a school. I didn't have this thing called a Google search engine, where I said I want to be a veterinarian, pop it in, and tell me the 150 schools I could go to. We didn't have that. We had the Britannia encyclopedias and stuff like that. But today, the world is at these kids' hands.
That's right.
There's no reason, there's no excuse for kids today to do what I did 25, 30 years ago. It's absolute. My 30th anniversary for being drug and crime free would be October 17th this year. And I haven't committed a crime and I haven't looked back. But 30 years ago, we didn't have these opportunities these kids have today. It's a lot of opportunities.
What do you say about the distrust that exists between law enforcement and the community?
Well, I got to quantify it a little better. It's law enforcement in the black community. Asians don't hate there's no distrust there. The Upper East Side white community, there's no distrust there. So we just got to lock it right in. The distrust is in our community, black and brown community. That's where the distrust is. And I blame it on the police department, because what happens is these police departments out here all around the country, not just NYPD, they got to start changing the narrative. No longer can they control the narrative. Before, they would go into a back room, somebody gets shot, unarmed, say, this is the story we're going to go with, guys. They can't do that no more. Not just because there's cameras everywhere, but they don't know who have Cell phones.
Right. Yes. Yes.
So they can't control the narrative anymore. And so what's happening now, you're still seeing incidents, and the cops are actually trying to say what occurred on television is not what really happened. Like, they can't bamboozle us no more. So when you do that, you create distrust in the community. All people want, I tell people all the time, I don't care if it's a black, white, green, or blue cop in my community, as long as they treat us with respect. I don't care what it is, because I could name about 50 black cops that I know. You don't want them near your house. Trust me when I tell you.
We got about a minute left. Let's talk about this book, Once a Cop, The Street, the Law, Two Worlds, One Man.
Yeah. It's written in 3 parts: hustler, cop, and executive. And the themes of the book are self-awareness, transformation, self-actualization, and obviously I talk about police policies and procedures. But overall, what I want people to get out of that book or take away is don't let your past identify or define your future. Because this kid in the back of this book, 17 years old, with a bunch of jury in 1985 in the hallways of Andrew Jackson High School. I know I had a gun on me because I had about $4,000 worth of jewelry, and I know I had a bunch of money in my pocket. You would have never thought that this guy would turn out to be an executive in the biggest police department in the country. As a matter of fact, this picture right here, I made captain. I was one of 13 black executives in a 40,000-man police force. I was able to tell 39,987 people what to do. It was a great feat.
I admire the fact that you're not on a yacht sailing the Mediterranean or sailing the Caribbean, but you're in the community talking to young people, trying to turn young people around, trying to set things straight between young people and their parents, young people and themselves, and young people and the cops.
Yes.
I really appreciate that. I'm going to read this.
Yes.
I want to encourage people to read this. Once a Cop, The Street, the Law. I've done some research into this group, but I haven't read it.
And I'm an award-winning author. We won 2 awards. The book won 2 awards.
Awesome.
And the paperback comes out April 18th.
Thank you, Corey Pegues. You can see this program and others on our Brooklyn 45 YouTube page, YouTube/Brooklyn 45 TV. We'd love to hear from you. Please post your comments on our Facebook page, Brooklyn 45 TV, or email us at info@brooklyn45.com. That's info@brooklyn45.com. On behalf of our entire Brooklyn 45 team, I'm Sam Tate.